assignment of relocatable classrooms.
Good afternoon, Chair Wu, Board of Education members, Ms. Turner-Little, and Dr. Martirano. I am Dan Lubley, Director of Capital Planning and Construction. Normally, our Manager of School Planning, Mr. Tim Rogers, would provide this report. However, he is unfortunately unable to join us due to family issues. To assist with any questions, with me tonight is our planning specialist from the Office of School Planning, Ms. Jennifer Bubanko. The report provided tonight is on the recommended assignment of relocatable classrooms for the school year 2021 through 2022. The recommendation is to place 8 new relocatable classrooms, including 1 at Northfield Elementary School, 2 at Mountain View Middle School, 2 at Thomas Viaduct Middle School, and 3 at Reservoir High School, totaling a projected cost of approximately $1.3 million. This is in line with the relocatable classroom request within the FY22 capital budget. The process for recommending the placement of relocatable classrooms is a collaborative approach each year. It includes needs or requests provided by individual schools, projected enrollment, and review of the physical availabilities of the school site. This year had the added challenge of the pandemic and the decrease in enrollment for the school system. This presented uncertainty and a limited access to standard information, which required the process to rely partially on prior year data and requests and recently completed enrollment projections. The Office of School Planning went back to review schools that were identified as having a need for additional space at the time of the 2020 relocatable report. The schools in this recommendation were evaluated for additional relocatable classrooms in previous years, including principal surveys, site visits, and discussions with principals. The intent was to base the recommendation on schools with a recent history of crowding and those that are likely to be crowded regardless of digital education offerings due to residential growth or other factors that have been persistent and are expected to continue. We thank the board members for their previous questions and did receive a request for information recently and will reach out to discuss the request for further clarification. At this time, Ms. Bubanko and I will be happy to address any further questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Lobley. And board members, please lower your hands first, and then if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Ms. Quaternio.
Thank you, and thank you for answering our questions in lieu of Mr. Rogers. I really appreciate it. My first question is about the Thomas Viaduct portable placements. This school site is already much smaller than it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be 1 school site at Oxford Square. Now we have 2 schools there, Hanover Hills and Thomas Viaduct, which decreased the size of the space. And we already put 2 portables there last year, and now we're going to add 2 more. What does the physical space look like? What are we taking away? Are we taking away any playground space and so forth, just due to the limited nature of the school site now?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Cotroneo. Specifically at Thomas Viaduct, we did take a look at that site and visited the current site. The Office of School Planning did take a look at the possibility of adding a 5-classroom modular out there. And we looked at locating that at the location where the 2 portable classrooms currently are. As you noted, there are limitations on that site, including the availability of utilities. So we did take a look at the 2 recommended portables that we are looking to put there now, and they would be located adjacent to the 2 existing. They are able to be sited so that they do not impact the play fields or the bus loop or even the hard surface area.
So I guess that sort of leads me to my next question. When you were talking about utility hookups, when you say $1.3 million, does that include the cost for each portable of these 8 portables to be all of the hookups, the utilities, the data, the transportation, all of that? Is this all inclusive, $1.3 million, or is there more to this?
That would be included, ma'am. It is approximately $160,000 for a single unit, which includes the fabrication of the unit, the permitting prices, the installation, including utilities, as well as the foundations and any grading and site restoration that may be needed.
Okay, thank you. This is just more in a comment of just the growth in that area and how it's just unbelievable how we already have exceeded its capacity at that school and now need 4 portables for a school that just opened up a few years ago and has just in the foreseeable future more and more growth that would feed into that school. So I just, I think it's a shame. It happened to Hanover Hills too. We're going to be at capacity very soon with that school. And we split this Oxford Square site into 2 schools instead of 1. And we've already limited the amount of space these schools have. And we continue now to take away with portable classrooms because of the growth in the area. Thank you.
And Dr. Lu.
Thank you. So I have a question about the attachment 2. So in attachment 2, I can see there are proposed changes relocatable classrooms for elementary school. So my question actually is about some schools that not been proposed changes. For example, I saw that for Running Brook Elementary School, the 2021 projected utilization is 76.3%. And then 2021 project utilization with relocatable are 69.6%. So those utilizations are very low. I saw there are 2 current relocatables. My question is, since this school is underutilized, will students still be using the relocatables? And then what's our plan for those relocatables? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. That's a very good question. I'll ask Ms. Bubenko to assist me with this question as well. But one thing I would like to point out is we are still looking to understand what the impact of the boundary adjustments from 2019 were. We looked to see what those would be in this past year, but obviously we're temporarily hampered by the pandemic. So we are continuing to watch what those outcomes may be. So part of the strategy for this year's relocation report was to be a little conservative and not necessarily take a relocatable from one school and move it to another when we come back to our full strength of students, we may need to potentially go back to that school and add another one. As far as the utilization of the school, I know that our Office of School Planning does talk with each of the individual schools and with the principals. I don't know if Ms. Bubenko, if you have any further information specifically to Running Brook, for instance, of how they might be utilizing those portables or not.
This is Jennifer Bubenko from the Office of School Planning. I am not aware of any conversations that we had this year with Running Brook Elementary School. I would like to note that we do have Title I services offered at Running Brook, as well as full-day pre-kindergarten, preschool, MINC, and ITP. All of those programs do take up space. But we could look into a little bit more how they're using those spaces, those programs, and the spaces, as well as the condition of the portables, because at some point the portables do get to a condition in which we aren't comfortable moving them. So we can look into that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the explanation. Because I'm using the Running Brook as an example, I saw that many schools, they have low utilization and there are current relocatables. And my understanding is you will look into this, and also after the pandemic, you'll see what will be the impact on the student utilization. Thank you so much for the answer. That's all I have today.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a question about the Running Brook and the Table Spring and Howard High. Right. So first question for Table Springs, because we have a new school in a few years, what are we going to do with the relocatables on the site?
That's a great question, Dr. Wu. As Table Springs is currently still utilizing its existing facility, it is still using the existing portables that are on site. Whenever the new facility is up and running for school year 22-23, it is our full intent to remove all the portables off site. As Ms. Bubenko noted, we do look at and work with our school facilities to look at the condition of each of the individual portables to see how they're rated. If a portable is older or is rated lower, meaning it can still be used, but as was discussed earlier through bids and contracts, it might require more maintenance. That might be a portable that we would look to demolish. Other portables that are still worth using, we would look at those in next year's relocation program to potentially move those to where they're needed instead of purchasing new. With regards to Hammond, we do have the 12 classroom modular. That has been a point of discussion. It will also need to leave the site due to the scope of work in the summer of 2022. So we will continue to monitor the need for that modular as well.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Damas-Moore, you're next.
Thank you. So looking at,
Can I go back? Mr. Washington, you have something to say?
Good evening, Scott Washington, Chief Operating Officer. Just one quick item to also note with what Mr. Lubley is saying. Not just the condition of the portables, Mr. Lubley, but also the amount of times the portables have been moved. That's also a factor as well. I know in the past, usually we don't like to move them more than 3 times. So sometimes that also takes into account, we have to take that into account because of the movability of the portables, as well as that stability factor as well. So another thing we consider in that process is that factor as well.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. And Ms. Damas-Moore.
thank you. Back last year, we had an amount listed for the purchase of 13 new portables of $1.7 million for the 1920 school year. And in this report for 2021, it's $1.5 million for 8 new for the 2021 school year. Can you explain how we're able to afford, this is good, how we were able to afford 1.7 for 13, but then 1.5 for 8?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. I would need to go back and specifically take a look at the relocation report for last year, but my understanding is last year's 13 classrooms did utilize some funds that were still in the bank for the relocatable program. So it was a culmination of the requested amount of the 1.7 plus funds that we currently had at the time to fulfill the need for the 13 portables. The 8 that is this year is actually estimated to be about 1.3 million, which is in line with the 1.5 line item that is requested in the fiscal year 22 capital budget.
Okay, if you would be kind enough to look back for the previous one to let me know about the 1.7 versus the 1.5, that would be helpful. Because if we are using funds from a previous year, that would be good to know, because as we're tracking this from year to year, what it looks like.
Absolutely.
Okay, my other question is, you also were kind enough to provide a list by school, which included program notes, which indicate which programs were being added to the school and which were being taken away. So I have one question. For Fulton Elementary School, without portables, we're looking at 112.9% projected utilization for next year. Yet we've added a pre-K, a preschool, and a MINC program. Does the school have the capacity in order to add those 3 additional programs, considering they're already at 112.9?
I'm going to ask Ms. Bubenko if you could address the programs at Fulton Elementary School.
Yes, sir. This is, let's see here. I'm just going to glance over. We do have the large multi-room unit sitting at Fulton Elementary School. And using the relocatable capacity along with the brick and mortar capacity, we would look at about 87% is how the school is being used if they would spread out into those spaces. So I think that's why we were able to put some additional programs there.
So would that be the same explanation? Would that explanation also apply to Cradle Rock Elementary, where they're at 113.6% without portables, and we're adding a full day pre-K at that location?
I would have to look into Cradle Rock Elementary School to get that answer for you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ms. Mosley.
Hi, I was wondering, in regards to boundary adjustments with the portables taken into consideration, where is the weight that's placed on these? Is the weight based on how long the school has had the portables, or how many the school has, or how many the school is actively using? Or is there not so much a weight given to the portables since the investment is made in them? Because it seems like they hang around for a while. They're not necessarily moving off.
If I could clarify, Ms. Mosley, are you asking when we do boundary adjustments in the boundary adjustment process, how much weight is given to the portable classrooms?
Right. Is the weight given mostly on if a school has the portables, if they're actively using the portables they have, or if a school has a lot of portables? What is the consideration of that? Because that impacts where they're placed and how long they're expected to be placed there.
Understood. Unfortunately, it is a reality that our portables do last at our schools longer than we would wish. However, we do look at the portables as a temporary solution. It would always be our intent to have a solely brick and mortar facility at each of our schools. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Bubenko, but during the boundary adjustments or area adjustment process, when we look at the capacity utilization of a school, we are looking at the capacity utilization of the actual brick and mortar facility and not the capacity utilization of the brick and mortar and the portables. Would that be correct, Ms. Bubenko?
Yes, sir.
Ms.
Thank
Mosley?
you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Quatronio?
Oh, actually, Mr. Washington clarified what I was going to say about portables, and just the fact that each time you move them, you take away the life, years on their life, and also it costs money to move them. It costs money to destroy them. So a lot of times they're just left in place because it's more cost efficient, and certainly most schools can find a way to use them, especially the Title I schools with lots of services and pullouts. So that's why it may look like, even though the schools are under capacity, there's portables there. They're serving a purpose, a needed purpose, and just from a cost-wise, it's just more efficient to leave them there and have them serve their, because otherwise we decrease their life by moving them and cause all sorts. But Mr. Washington answered the question. I'll stop rattling on. Thank you.
Okay, do I have other questions? And do we need a motion, because that's actually scheduled for March 25th? Okay.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Roger, main B undervolt. Okay, stand by, 13. We're looking at it.